And so we're going to bring up Jeff Yang, who Jeff actually was the first venture capitalist I've ever interviewed when I first moved out to San Francisco in 1999. We talked about how it was amazing, an amazing time to invest in internet stocks, and we all had to put all our savings in, right, Jeff? That was fun times. Jeff Yang, everyone.
Thank you. In 1999, I was 8, so that worked out great. Yeah, great, perfect. Listen, it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend and colleague, Jim Lanzone. And I thought maybe I'd just tell you a little bit about Jim in case you don't know. Jim, and this is really relevant, was a diehard graduate of UCLA. There's some question about whether he actually finished. But I'm told that he was the only tall Italian in a Jewish fraternity. But persevered and got through UCLA with a deep love for the school and a deep love for all the sports in the school, and that'll come to play in a minute. I really met Jim when I was on the board of Ask.com, and we bought a company called eTours. And Jim was the founder and president of eTours, a company started in 1997. And one thing you got to know about Jim, but let me take a step back for a minute. You know, I was told a long time ago that everything good came in threes. You know, Charlie's Angels, Jill, Kate, and Kelly came in threes. The Three Stooges, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the core values of the Navy, courage, honor, and commitment. The Holy Trinity. And for Jim, that's no exception. For Jim, his three core values are entertainment, sports, and UCLA. And you'll see a little bit more about that in a minute. So he started eTours, which was really a curated walk through the web. And I think it was mainly to promote UCLA into sports, but to give people an idea of what all the cool things that were on the internet. When Ask acquired eTours in 2001, Jim joined Ask and became, the principal product person at Ask, and ultimately became CEO. And I think he fixed the search results so that if there were anything related to sports and collegiate, the returns were UCLA and how great UCLA was, and it really fueled his deep love for sports and entertainment in UCLA. He left in 2008 and joined us at Redpoint as an entrepreneur in residence, and ultimately started a company called Clicker. And Clicker was really about being the guide and the search engine for video on the internet, and he'll tell you a little bit more about it, I'm sure. But it was the perfect job for Jim. I mean, if you look at his Twitter profile, there's a picture of the dude from Evil Dead 2 and a link to a music soundtrack of Dirk Diggler singing "You've Got the Touch, You've Got the Power," and this is no lie. It's worth following him to see what he tweets about. And in 2011, we sold the company to CBS, and now Jim is president of CBS Interactive. And I'm told that he was described by Les Moonves the other night, who is the president of CBS, as a pop culture savant that knows more about bands, movies, TV than a 16-year-old girl on MySpace. That's what I'm told. There have been other, I think this is true though. None of this is untrue. I was also told that there was a chance that he went to CBS so that he could be on the fantasy football experience. Actually, he was on the show, and to influence the outcomes of March Madness, which I think is all possible. But he's done a great job there, and he'll tell you about it. Personally, Jim is married to a wonderful woman who is supposedly funnier than he is, and has three terrific, extremely bright kids who could probably go to Stanford, but he'll probably force them to go to crappy UCLA. Easy. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and fellow Fletch aficionado, Jim Lanzone.
That was like 20% true. It was not a direct quote, by the way, of Les. I don't want to get fired already.
Okay, you get me as well here.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a little fireside chat. So I just learned something. I guess we have something somewhat similar. I was the only Asian in my Jewish sorority.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in
Good for you.
college.
Well, there's a lineage. My father was the president of a Jewish fraternity at Queens College in New York, so I don't know how it happened. It wasn't like I was guided, but Happy New Year, by the way.
Oh, that's true. Yes, I know. I got a few complaints. And my husband, Ezra, asked me, why did we have this night on Rosh Hashanah? So I'm sorry about that, but thank you that everybody made it here. So Jim, let's start with Clicker. Why not tell everyone what Clicker does and why it was so important for CBS to buy it?
Well, so after I left Ask and I was in EIR with Jeff at Redpoint, and it's probably worth mentioning, I mean, Redpoint were the main original investors in Ask Jeeves, and Jeff was on our board, and that's how we first met. In fact, I think the first day we met was September 11th, because that was my first day officially on or going to a board meeting. There was a board meeting, and they still held the meeting. It didn't get canceled. Oh, so anyway, I left, and I had done a startup for 4 years in the 90s, and I went down the road of being a public company CEO again, and I just I didn't actually choose between doing that and doing Clicker. It was more just that I hit on this idea with Dave Goldberg, who's the CEO of SurveyMonkey, founder of Launch, and he and I brainstormed that idea together, and it was just one I couldn't let go of. The television was moving online, and that the future of TV, however long that would take, was going to be more about not whether, not when things were on, like the old TV guide, but it was going to be more like a search engine, whether it was on, where you could find it, subscription versus free, et cetera. And so I just was fixated on that idea. So that literally is what we built. We raised $8 million from Jeff and Bill Gurley at Benchmark, and we spent a year building it, kind of called the old search team out of the woods. Spent a year building it, launched it at TechCrunch 50 the next year. And actually, I mean, unlike a lot of startups where I think there's a lot of pivoting, happening, we built the exact product that we wanted. And I think it's exactly the way you will wind up navigating TV in the future. But we sold after 16 months. So.
You raised 19 million and sold 19 million in total, right?
Yes.
And sold it. So most startup CEOs don't get acquired. Well, first raise 19 million and then sell after 18 months, but then they don't get acquired by a company and then become the president of over several thousand employees.
Yeah.
How does something like that happen? I mean, this has got to have started with a call from Leslie Moonves. I mean, how did this whole conversation start?
Well, there are two things going on for them. One is that Neil, a friend of mine who was their CEO of the division before, who had been the CEO at CNET, was leaving. And so they did need someone in that position. But we, after New Year's, after CES last year, just started getting a lot of inbound interest. And so we had multiple companies after us. And, with CBS, it was, for them, with CBS.com and with TV.com, which is a 20 million user website, they have the belief in owning navigation, community, metadata around TV. So it's not just showing video, which is what we do on CBS.com, but if you could own the place that you would actually be using to navigate to video in the future, the TV guide of the next 50 years, that would be a powerful asset to own. I think that's how it strategically fits. For other companies, it was interesting. It was obviously we did one thing, so everybody wanted that one thing. But the way other people would use it would be different. In this case, it's an interesting opportunity to merge Clicker and TV.com into one property. That's kind of the mega site around for navigating and discovering content on the web.
Was the fact that you became president one of the reasons why you went over?
Well, I mean, and really the team at Clicker, this was my A team from Ask. These are all top 10% performers. I mean, my search guy, he created most of the algorithms that you'll find on any search engine today, all the user behavior algorithms that are really the core of any real engine at this point. He patented and created those. All the front-end engineers who built Ask 3D, which, you know, at the time Walt Mossberg wrote about as being better than Google, and I think you now see as the inspiration for Bing was that team, and so they just, you know, I think all 37 of us, it was a big, but I mean, obviously they needed an executive too, so that was part of it.
And now Jeff mentioned eTours. You started that in your
eTour.
eTour. You started that in your mid-20s and during the bubble. And I remember you and I spoke before, and you said that you crashed and burned with eTour. You had several buyout opportunities, but chose to pursue an IPO rather than an acquisition. I know it was a different time, but did any of that experience influence or play into your decision to sell to CBS?
It was a very different time. Brian, some of you may know Brian Norgard, who's the founder of Chill. I was at breakfast with him the other day, and he called me 110 in internet years.
Oh, man.
He said he was 50 and he's 29, so.
Yeah. Well, I was around back then,
I'm 40, so. Look, eTour, I was one of 3 founders. We started out of school. Thank you, by the way, to King and Spalding, because I went to Emory in Atlanta. I was in law school and decided I hated law and didn't want to work at King and Spalding. That's where they're from. That's their main headquarters. And switched over to business school with never having had a job before, and wound up being the intern for the CEO of a big company down there, and built their website, and with no experience, and I got cocky and started this company out of school with 2 classmates. And I was the product founder. Another classmate was CEO, another one was CFO. And I mean, eTour, even in 1997, it was very, very similar to StumbleUpon, is essentially what we created. Toolbar, it was populated with websites, next site button, do it by interest. Some of the sites were paid. Very, you know, a Web 1.0 version of StumbleUpon. And I say that because StumbleUpon is populated socially, and ours was populated by editors. It was hand selected, 30 kids just like throwing websites in there all day.
Back then, that was how a lot of people populated their sites.
Well, it's one reason why we had 200 employees. I don't think StumbleUpon has more than 30 even today. It was horrible use of capital. But so anyway, it got to be pretty big at that point. It was #1 in the web in user frequency. People would just come back all the time. And by 2000, we were a pretty big site. We had 5 million users, and we had all these Web 1.0 acquisition offers of hundreds of millions of dollars. And our board made the decision, of course, forget that, we'll go and IPO. So I think that was March of 2000. We'd written the S1, and I think we had 8 million of revenue, which is very, very 2000. And then market crash.
That was actually your forward-looking estimates, right? 8 million.
No, that was real. We had 8 million revenue, but you know, going public on 8 million revenue. And you know, we signed a 10-year lease on a building in downtown Atlanta. I mean, it was just all the kinds of things you shouldn't do. And so we went on fumes for a while and wound up selling to Ask, I think, in May of 2001, which was, you know, a good deal for them, but that was a whole other story with what wound up happening after that.
Okay. So none of that decision to not sell back then influenced you this time around? That maybe you've got a good thing, CBS wants you, maybe you should.
No, I mean, it was, look, I mean, Jeff and Bill, they're both like, look, you want to keep going for it, we'll keep going, you know. And I think the thing was just the offer compared to being 16 months old. And then I think Bill actually summarized it really well in saying that it's a sport of kings playing in that industry without content rights. And you know, I remember we were shut down by Hulu within our first 2 months, even when we were in private beta from accessing a lot of their content. And so, you know, I think right product, it was really helpful to have a sugar daddy, you know, behind you, an 800-pound gorilla behind you as you would pursue this. And I think merging it with a site that has 20 million users and incredible link juice is something that's going to be really helpful for Clicker.
We're going to talk a lot about CBS Interactive and the future of CBS Interactive and your views on media, but this is Fair Splash. We do talk about lessons, and you mentioned lessons learned as an entrepreneur and what you've learned. You mentioned, again, in a previous conversation about one of the biggest mistakes that you made at Ask was to over-monetize. And, you know, a lot of people here should were probably thinking, wait, shouldn't you be thinking about monetizing a lot? So what's the lesson there?
Well, it was interesting because when I got to Ask, it was, it was post-September 11th. It was a tough time, and the company wasn't profitable. I think we were worth $30 million. I think we had a $30 million market cap, even though we had 100 in cash. So, and the reason is because, first of all, Ask at that point was a product that wasn't a product that was a great user experience anyway. And then also, search didn't have a business model yet. We were just migrating from Overture being goto.com to really being Overture and really proving it. And so we started, once we then switched to Google, and then, it was like, holy shit, we can make a lot of money off of this. And so we went to town. I mean, we put, I think the standard in search even now would be 3 ads above the results. We went to 5 very quickly. Okay. And then, and that gets built in your numbers for year-over-year growth. And pretty soon you wind up seeing even more ads above the results on commercial queries. And we would measure all this because we had a pretty amazing data warehouse, and we tracked every click, every piece of data on the site. And search is very easy to kind of, understand all the levers through data. And so what you very quickly would see is that users, if you had too many ads, they would come back less frequently. And the whole way we grew Ask, again, from the place it was at to selling for over $2 billion to IAC in 2005, was by improving the product. We had a lot of users, and they just didn't come back very often. So if we improved the product, they come back more often. We doubled market share. And we're the only ones to have done that since Google launched. Nobody else has gained that much market share. And so on their own. And so what we realized was there's a difference between optimization and maximization of revenue. Maximization is just making every dollar you can right now. And what happens is the user curve will kind of go like this as revenue kind of goes this way. Whereas optimization is that point in the curve where you're making as much money as you can without sacrificing the user experience so that people are coming back as much and your audience is still growing. So.
Well, good lesson to learn. Now you can take that to CBS Interactive. So let's fast forward. You were brought in to maybe turn things around, shake things up. What was going on with CBS? Maybe what was wrong with CBS Interactive, and what are you doing to change it?
So, yeah, I don't think it's not a turnaround situation. It's more of a good to great potentially situation where, look, CBS Interactive it's the old CNET, so CNET, ZDNet, download.com, all those things, plus all of CBS's online assets, so CBS.com, TV.com, CBS Sports, which used to be a public company called Sportsline. We also have GameSpot, which is one of the top 2 gaming websites, so it's very broad. It's over 300 million users a month. And by the way, we also have like 100, I didn't really know the depth of this till I joined, 180 million users a month in China. So it's a big property, and I think for the most part, what needs to happen is an injection of great user experiences across all these products. I think there's still room to improve all of them, and maybe some sizzle on top of that steak. But none of these brands, CNET itself is still #1 in audience and tech journalism. It's 5 to 10 times larger than most of the blogs that you guys might associate as being hotter than CNET. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because CNET historically has been more down the path of like a Bloomberg or New York Times. It's more hard news than it is blogging and gossip and whatever. And so it's very large, it's very impactful, and I think if you can bring some, maybe some sizzle to that side of it, it has room to grow even more.
How do you bring sizzle to that?
Well, my first thing is just on all the websites, if you would go across these things, you would see that, it's been a while since they've had world-class design on any, And so one example that I love is the first day I joined, I got my design guys in London, and we set to actually have CBS.com be the first thing that we tackled, because I just wanted to lay the gauntlet down and say, this is what great design looks like. And so if you go to CBS.com right now, I am very seldomly that happy with how design turns out. I just think It's great. And so we need to do that across the board, and you'll see that across all these things. For CNET, it's not just that. It's anchor tenant writers. I think the writers at CNET have always taken a back seat kind of to the brand, whereas these days I think the writers themselves are the stars, and we need to get behind them and really push them more. So anyway, I think site to site it's probably different, but.
What about so I'm thinking like making it look more like a blog and maybe have, no?
It's not that bad.
Well, I think
no, I mean,
that's
it doesn't
catching
need
on.
that. It doesn't need to it already looks enough like a blog, I would say.
What about some strategic changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the site. So GameSpot might be a good example of where in the gaming industry a lot of it is moving to video. And so historically it was the #1 like review site and community site for gamers. A lot of that is moving to video. It's just strategically that needs to move that way. Of course, there's also the elephant in the room of Hulu and of online distribution for CBS content. That's a lot of work strategically to figure out what we're doing there. I think we've had the right, or they, but now us, we've had the right strategy to date. But it's still something you have to evaluate every day as you go forward.
Well, you don't want to partner with them in the U.S., though, with Hulu. You don't want to give them
Well,
any content.
in Japan, by the way, we did Hulu Japan, but it was more similar to what we just did with Netflix and Amazon, where we licensed them a part of the back catalog of CBS for a lot of money. And so in Hulu Japan, like Family Ties and Star Trek and Dukes of Hazzard. So that's what we did in Japan. But no, in the U.S., the strategy of CBS is to send all that traffic to our brand, to CBS.com, where we own it. We do 100% of the monetization. We don't share it with our competitors. And when it gets distributed, we decide where it gets distributed, and it has our brand when that happens, not an aggregator brand. So, I always actually believe that. Jeff and I have had lots of historical conversations about this, where I never really understood completely the aggregator Hulu model for a network. And I think CBS has made the right call there.
That's your model, though, with Clicker. It's a big aggregator.
No, because we weren't a video site. We were a site about video. So in fact, I was self-interested, because if all programming wound up on one website, you wouldn't need a TV guide for the web. You just need site search of that website. But look, I mean, CBS has spent 70, 80 years building this brand. Consumers do know it. And so, I just didn't think it would make sense to give it to somebody else. And I always have thought CBS.com, or now your iPad app, which we don't have yet, but would be it's the equivalent of Channel 5, right? For CBS Now. And so just because the device or the way you're accessing it changes doesn't mean you throw everything out and take a quarter of somebody else's company.
Well, now, you had said in a recent conference, I guess earlier this week, that you were tripling down on video. So Hulu's been for sale. Why not buy Hulu?
Yeah, I don't know that they would sell that to CBS. And I think that's part of the challenge is if you're one of those networks, you're selling someone to compete with your own site. So I think that's kind of the dilemma there. Look, CBS.com has been #1 among the networks for 33 straight months. We're the 12th largest in web property in the world. I think the closest network is 30th. And so I think that's the strategy. And the reason I talked about moving to video is just because that's where premium content is headed. Mm-hmm. The strategy of CBS has been very consistently down the path of premium content. That's why they acquired CNET. And so, I think you talk about monetizing premium content, video is absolutely where that's headed.
We have 10 minutes, so in 5 minutes I'm going to open it up to the audience. So we do have people with mics here, so if you do have questions for Jim, just get them prepared. Okay, so you talked about video, and so I guess, CBS Interactive, I don't know if I'm supposed to share these numbers, but the majority of your revenue comes from display ads, not video.
Well, we don't disclose our revenue numbers publicly because we're part of the overall entertainment group of CBS, and that gets reported. The majority of our revenue is display advertising. I would pretty much count video within that. But then the rest is like we have the #1 paid fantasy sports site, and so there's other ways that we make money as well.
So I don't know, TV gets the lion's share of all the advertisements. They still get higher CPMs than the videos on site. So is the ultimate goal for CBS Interactive content just to be on TV?
No, look, I mean, I think an interesting stat is that TV viewing keeps rising as long as well as the internet. And so really the thing that's being sacrificed is people's free time or work time, sleep time. But they're all growing together. I mean, I think by the time you would say our goal is to be on TV, I don't know that the difference between TV and your laptop is really that distinguishable anymore at that point. But I think that's a long road to get there, and I think the strategy of CBS is to be pragmatic and not just go throw itself off a cliff because there may be a cliff or may not at some point. I think it's to migrate into the future, and being pragmatic about it has been a really successful strategy for them. So.
Why is it that TV advertisers still focus on TV and not internet video? I know that there's tons of money coming into it.
No, it's all going, a ton is going to internet video. I think really it's just a matter of having enough inventory in internet video. I mean, we cannot produce enough to satisfy advertisers. And it's a little bit different, right? The trends in display advertising that's like traditional banner advertising right now, it's into social networks or ad networks, and these ads, you don't know where they're showing, they're below the fold, they're not, they're viewed, they're not. You have to put technology to track whether or not these ads are even showing versus premium content. And that's why I think having these strong brands is the way to go, is something that can survive these different fads that come and go.
All right, we're going to change things up around here. Let's just talk about new media and how you can even make it in this environment. Yahoo shares have done nothing since 2009. It's more than half the price it traded in 2007. AOL is a third price it traded at last year. Demand Media, which went public this year, is down 65% from earlier this year when it went public. What does it take to create a new media company that shareholders actually like?
Well, see, I think CBS has been number one media company stock in the last 3 years. I think it's top 10% of the S&P. And so I think it's being diversified on a consistent strategy. I mean, CBS is not all over the place in the different things that it dips into. It's premium content. Les will get up and say we're a content company. The furthest maybe we get away from traditional content might be billboards, but I'd still say that, and that's a huge business, and that's still consistent. They own Simon & Schuster, they own radio stations, TV stations, so I think having that consistent strategy is probably the biggest thing. And then, the companies you mentioned are web only, and so that's probably another challenge. Although I think Yahoo has a lot of potential, and
okay, so should CBS Interactive buy Yahoo, and if so, how much would you pay?
I think they'd be a little bigger than us at this point, but I don't know. I think there's a difference, though, right? I think that they are a portal, and I think at some point they need to embrace that. They are the #1 portal. That's how they get their traffic. That's why people search through them. They're still really the second-ranked search engine. And Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Finance, all these things. I mean, it happens because they're a portal, and I think, but at the end of the day, you see what happens when you don't invest in product, right? You see what happens with email, and some of these products are not as good as they used to be.
What would you do if you were president or CEO of Yahoo?
I can't give them that if I'm competing with them.
Okay, should Yahoo and AOL merge?
Look, AOL's challenge is having been a dial-up business and an ISP, and they have some good online brands now. I think it's in some ways the inverse of some of the brands I've inherited, which have a lot of traffic and have a lot of embedded users, and maybe have needed a little bit more sizzle, or people just to be aware of how good they are and how well they're doing. And I think AOL kind of has brands that are have a little sizzle to them, but are just not as big, and so it's harder for them to make up as much ground.
Okay. Did you answer that question about Yahoo and AOL merging?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not their first option.
How about CBS? Does anyone have any questions? We have 4 minutes, so I have a few more questions. So, but you can raise your hand if anyone has questions about media.
See it with this light.
It is kind of hard. So, oh, there's a few people here. Can you? Right here, right. This gentleman right here. Okay. How about should CBS Interactive buy Pandora? As we wait for no, you have to answer that question.
Are you asking him?
No, I'm asking you.
You're asking me?
Yes.
Well, we already own Last FM.
I know, but
I love Pandora and I love Tim. So, should they do it? No. I mean, that's, obviously they've made their bet in that business. So, what's interesting is that CBS has another problem, which is that they get charged terrestrial radio rates for streaming through Last FM. So they pay 75% more for the same stream as Pandora. But really Last FM's history has been as a data site and scrobbling and keeping your site history there, or your listening history there and all that. So it's never been a direct competitor anyway, which is why it gets integrated into Spotify and other places. So anyway,
okay.
What was the
question over here?
Hi, Tom Sheehan, Red Oxygen. What's your opinion of the Huffington Post acquisition? AOL.
Opinion of the Huffington Post acquisition. I think they need to see. I mean, I think it's definitely a different tack than our sites, which are we have a lot of editors and people who create this content directly as opposed to aggregating. So I think that's the bet, is how much things go towards curation versus original content.
Hello?
Valuation?
No. My opinion of the acquisition price of HuffPo? No.
My name is Dave Prescher with Involution Digital. I used to work for CBS with radio and television. Cool. With your view that CBS is a content player, how do you feel about the distribution player of Comcast buying up the NBC and their cable channel rights? How do you view that versus your strategy, and how do you think that'll work?
It's a good question. So look, I mean, I think in some ways, I mean, it passed, right? It passed legal scrutiny, and so I think the world is kind of verticalizing that way, in the delivery chain, and so Comcast is a way that you navigate and get to video. I mean, I've said this, and I do not mean this literally, so I don't want to be misquoted, but that CBS buying Clicker is a very, very poor man, like a hobo's version of Comcast and NBC merging together, because NBC's a big network, and they're matching up with a company whose job is to facilitate you accessing content. And so who knows? Clicker could become that of the future. So I think it's smart for them. I think that's a lot of the direction things are headed, and I think a lot of the media companies are dipping into all parts of the value chain. And I think you'll continue to see that.
If there's one more back there, we have 1 more minute. So
yeah.
I see.
What's up?
Gleb from Backblaze.
Two companies that haven't been mentioned. Thank you. Two companies that haven't been mentioned in discussion are Amazon and Apple, and it feels like they are in many ways becoming our portals to content. Do you worry about them getting a stranglehold over the media companies going forward?
Again, that's a good question. I think that there's probably two sides to that. One is, I think it's in a content company's best interest not to let anyone get too much power. So just a balance of power and letting 1,000 flowers bloom and making sure they all get sunlight is probably a good idea, so that no one has pricing power over you in the future. You can keep selling your content to them. So which leads to the other side, which is, no, I mean, we are happily selling our content. We do EST deals, so we're selling downloads on Apple, and we just sold Amazon another portion of that back library for Amazon Prime. So I think having multiple providers is a good thing, and I think we're a content company, they're a distributor, and so where it makes strategic sense, we'll partner with distributors. So I like seeing them grow that way.
All right, time's up. But one more question here because we have a lot of entrepreneurs. This is the last question. I know time's up, but
Yeah, it wasn't a very startup guy answer.
I know. Here's a startup. Here's for all the startups out there. So CBS Interactive acquisitions. What type of acquisitions are you looking to make? Startups. There's a lot of media and video companies out here.
Well, I have 5 divisions: news, which includes CNET, CBS News, all that; sports, entertainment, gaming, and international. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we're going to just throw money around them. We're going to look very carefully at acquisitions, but those are the 5 areas that we're looking to grow in. And then within that, it's the same value proposition that you always have to have on an acquisition. It either has to be, a strategic asset that you need, or it has traffic, or it's strategic. You've been ended around by somebody else, and you got to get back there because you're a market leader. I mean, I don't think it's a big question of what kinds of companies we would want. It's more they would have to fit in those categories.
All right, great. I think we have some bankers around here too that are going to be hovering around you.
Yeah.
All right, Jim.
I have my lawyer over here, so you got to go through him. He's Canadian. Don't fear him.
Thank you.
And Jewish.
And Jewish.
Thanks, guys.